Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today we're going to be discussing how much money Stomaria actually makes. So this is something that I'm asked about for various different reasons. There are some people that believe being the Emperor of Stomaria is a full-time job, and so the coffers of Stomaria must be overflowing with cash. Others believe that Stomaria is some kind of shady money-making scheme that's scamming people out of their money, and so there must be some nefarious activities going on. Whereas others are just curious as to how the various projects we have going on within Stomaria are actually funded. So let's tackle these one at a time before we delve into how much money Stomaria actually makes. And this figure is obviously going to exclude the contributions from the Imperial family, which makes up about 90% plus of the funding for Stomaria. First, is being the Emperor of Stomaria a full-time job? No, absolutely not. I work 5 days a week and sometimes more to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. It is an aspiration of mine to be able to do more of this in lieu of what you might call actual work, but at the moment it's just not feasible. In terms of Stomaria being a shady money-making scheme that's looking to scam people out of their money, this is normally something that's touted by one of two kinds of people. The first being people that are utterly ignorant as to what they're talking about and normally just repeat the lies that they've seen elsewhere, and there's the others which are entirely malicious. Normally self-defined micronations, very obscure micronations with very little else going on, that are determined to bring Stomaria down by whichever means they can. And it hasn't gone unnoticed by a great many people that those that spread these sorts of malicious lies are always very vague and ambiguous in what they mean. They never cite specific examples of what they're talking about, and when pressed, they'll normally say something along the lines of Stomaria allows its supporters to contribute financially to it, or it sells merchandise, as shocking a revelation as that is. And putting aside the fact that, as I mentioned earlier in this video, over 90% of the funding of Stomaria comes directly out of the pockets of the Imperial family, there is nothing inherently wrong about allowing people to make contributions or to make purchases in support of an endeavour that they want to get behind. There is nothing shady about it. And the thing is, I don't even need to compare Stomaria to a business, charity or organisation of any kind to justify this stance. You only have to look as far as the upper echelons of the Micronational community, a community which the proponents of the Stomaria is shady mantra almost always identify as being a part of. Westarctica, Ladonia, Flandrensis, Molossia, Slowjamastan, Sealand, Liberland, Atlantium, the list goes on and on. They sell flags and badges and bits of coloured paper as standard, with others going further, selling copper coins for £100 or more, or bricks for £50 or more, and even war bonds. Of course, most also accept donations outright, or sell titles to raise revenue. And you know what? That's fine. They're allowed to offer all of these, and people may, if they so wish, purchase all of the above. And likewise, we too can offer a range of options for those interested in supporting us through donations and through the sale of merchandise. And finally, the means in which Stomaria is funded, excluding the contributions from the Imperial family, come from three primary sources. That is to say, it is taxation, or more specifically donations, from citizens who have made a financial contribution without expecting anything in return. There is the sale of the merchandise at the Imperial market, and then there's the ad revenue that we generate through our monetized social media accounts. So now that we've covered these talking points, let's discuss just how much money Stomaria actually makes. So since Stomaria's foundation on the 16th of June 2019, it's gone on to raise £2,750, or about £460 per annum, which is obviously not a lot in the great scheme of things. That said, this figure is relatively skewed, as it wasn't until the tail end of 2021 that we actually started to generate revenue for Stomaria in any real way, in the sense that it was at the end of 2021 when we first established the Imperial market. It's when our YouTube channel was first monetized, and it's when we first allowed supporters to become citizens through a direct financial contribution through our Patreon campaign. Put another way, from June 2019 to June 2020, we raised £110 through donations, or taxes as it would be more appropriately called in the nation building experience. Whereas from June 2020 to June 2021, that did increase slightly to £175 through that same method. However, from that point on, things really took off. So if you take the remaining £2,465 and divide that by the remaining 4 years, then the figure comes closer to about £615 per annum. But if you look at the most recent year, that is to say June 2024 to June 2025, we are significantly above that average at £750. Now, the actual breakdown of all of these funds is actually worth discussing in more detail, I think, because as I said, it comes from three primary sources: taxation, the imperial market, and of course, the ad revenue from our monetized social media accounts. So I wanted to spend a bit of time just discussing this. So first, 71% of Stomaria's revenue has come from taxation. That means any financial contribution that our citizens and supporters have made through GoFundMe, through Patreon, or through PayPal, in which they've expected nothing in return. Put another way, these are simply donations. Next, we have 15% of Stomaria's revenue coming from the sales from the imperial market. Though the imperial market was closed for around 2 years between mid-2023 until earlier this year in 2025. And finally, 14% of Stomaria's revenue has come from our monetized social media accounts. Now, this was actually quite a promising source of revenue back in the day, but about a year in, around the end of 2022, the amount we generated from YouTube dropped significantly. And despite a massive increase in views and subscribers, with the watch hours having remained very consistent during that time, the amount we make month by month today is about half of what it was back in 2022, when our channel was about half the size. After doing some research into this, it seems that we were far from the only ones that experienced this sharp decline in revenue, but it is frustrating nonetheless, as initial targets and forecasts would have seen Stomaria's channel generating about £300 a year from ad revenue, but it's actually closer to £150 a year, so that's far from ideal. And while these sorts of figures might seem like a lot of money to some, to others it's just a drop in the bucket. It all depends on what you perceive to be a lot of money. And while, as I made clear earlier in this video, that the vast majority of the funding of Stomaria comes directly out of the pockets of the imperial family, this is something that I want to chip away at, in the sense that I'm very keen to promote the increase of revenue from other sources, so that I can focus more of my attention and more of my financial resources on my own family. That is to say, for every penny and for every pound that I spend on developing Stomaria in some form or another, is another penny and another pound that I could be spending paying down my mortgage, taking my family on holiday, or going on some experiences, retiring early, or whatever else. Stomaria does demand sacrifice. It does demand a lot of my time, a lot of my energy, a lot of my financial resources. It's not something that I begrudge at all. I love what I do, and I love what we have built. But it is unsustainable from my perspective to keep going at the rate that I am without any recourse. And so we have to kind of shift our focus a little bit going forward. Because while Stomaria has been a net positive for myself, for my family, and for many of those involved, it should always be remembered, just like in our motto, family comes before fatherland. If you want to learn more about Stomaria, or play an active role in our development and expansion, visit our website at www.stomaria.com and find out what it means to be a Stomarian.